You ready to film another exciting episode? Real good at doing stuff?
I can't wait.
Gotta be more exciting.
I can't wait.
Okay, good. There we go.
All right, let's talk about Cleetus Mcfarland and our surprise, unexpected, no prep win at Streetcar Takeover Bristol the other day. This was some races are something you boast about, or if you win, or there's something that you're proud of and you boast about and you puff your chest out and you make a big deal about. This is not one of those. Sometimes you win and the truth is you just kind of got lucky and things turned out that way. And that was what happened in this deal. So when I say surprise no prep, what I'm referring to is the fact that for whatever reason, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus here. It just is what it is. And on this channel, we talk about racing and the different conditions you have to deal with and how to overcome problems and whatnot. And in this situation, the situation presented itself as what is generally supposed to be a radial race, and there was almost no existent glue usage. And I'm going to say a statement that is an odd statement, but in this case it's pretty much true. The amount of money spent on glue at this mega buck facility for this race was probably less than just about any of the racers put in their hauler in diesel fuel money to get to this race. Any single racer. So just to put it in perspective of like the economics of the deal, to me that doesn't make sense. Like I say, I'm not trying to cast shade on anybody. It's just kind of that was the situation of the day. We had just a super slick race track. Now, all right, as far as the tuning aspect goes of things, this obviously presents a lot of difficulties for us. And in our case, we have kind of extra, I want to talk about, we just never had any, the whole thing was a mess, right? So there's not a lot I can pull out of this as far as like tuning specifics on, how to make your race car faster from this. But we can talk about a little bit about why this is really tough for a car like Mullet. Maybe a little tougher than a lot of cars. And there are several reasons for this. One, Mullet has a few strikes against it on any surface. One is that it's a radial car with a 118-inch wheelbase, right? When everything's just perfect, that can be okay. But the truth is, anything less than perfect, and it's a trick for several reasons. One, when you're staged, your rear tire is not even in the same spot everybody else is leaving from. Literally, it's not there. You got to move a few inches before you even get to everybody else's starting spot. Now in practical terms, the longer your wheelbase is, your race car is, the more it can be difficult to keep your tires stuck, to get weight shifted back on the rear tires and to keep weight there. So you kind of to make it work, you got to strike it hard and shove some power in it to keep everything going, right? And a racetrack like this, that is just not an option. You cannot do that, So the long wheelbase really works against you. Another factor here that's a big factor is, we got a big, in this case, it's a Steve Morris billet. It's a badass motor, makes a ton of power, but on a day like today, you're trying to figure out ways to get rid of power and get rid of torque. There's only that. Sometimes that's harder to do than you realize, So that's definitely a factor, but the factor that comes from that is the more important factor, and that is lots of power requires a kind of tight torque converter. You got to have a torque converter that'll hold that power, and that's the thing that's real difficult to get rid of on a day like this. Like in a perfect world, if you go to a situation like that, first thing you do is put the car up in the toter and get the converter swapped out to something else, because this is not going to work. A prime example would be beer money. Beer money has a very loose torque converter in it, right? The tighter your torque converter is, the harder it is to keep that tire stuck, because the connection between the engine and the rear tire is so tight. There's not a lot of slippage going on there. It just makes things difficult. If you got a looser converter, there's a little bit of sponge there that helps in this regard. And when you have a motor that'll make 4,000 horsepower or whatever, you can't have a loose torque converter, or you generally don't have one. In our case, we don't have one. We don't have anything to swap to, so we're just kind of there in the situation. Now, a couple things that we could, in some situations, do to make things go a little smoother, or to work around the circumstances. The first is we can put some weight in the rear of the car. Well, in this case, we don't have any provisions for that. This car's already, that's another factor. This car's already very heavy, so that's another thing we gotta work against, But we don't have any provisions to hang lead or anything in the back of the race car. The only option we have is this car's a street car, so there's a pump gas fuel cell back there. We can fill it with gasoline. Well, pretty quickly I decided I don't want to do that. That's a dangerous thing to do. If we've got a race car out there going 200 plus mile an hour with, I don't think it's a good idea to put 15 plus gallons of 87 in the back of this thing. If you back this thing in the wall at that kind of speed, it's bad enough to have a big fire, and it's even worse to have one that's fueled by a ridiculous amount of gasoline. That could get really bad really quick. I've already almost lost one driver in a serious fire, and I don't want to see it happen again. So I decided against that, and we rule that out, and that's kind of how it is. Another option that I have is second gear leaving in second gear. I asked Cleet if this thing has a second gear leave. He says he believes it does. Now, I kind of decided not to do it, because the problem with doing it is we've never done it before. We don't know if it's going to work or not. We don't know how it's going to what's going to happen. But the biggest thing is, we don't know if the car is going to bump in like that, right? So it may take a different bump tune-up. This car doesn't have an external transmission cooler, converter cooler, so we don't have a lot of time. I can't be just spooling this thing in the pits trying to see if it's going to bump or not. So I kind of ruled that out. Now, in retrospect, if you were to say, all right, well, what would you take from this whole debacle, and what would you do different? Because you always, win or lose, I always try to look at everything that happened during a race and say, all right, well, where do we do good, and where can we improve, right? And I would say that maybe the other thing is, like, when you get to, you don't know what the track's going to be. Like, the track is a mess, right? But I don't know. Maybe an hour later, they're going to treat it, just pour a drum of glue on it, and it's going to come around. You don't kind of know what's going to happen. But if I had to do it again, I would say probably what I should have done is just said, all right, this is going to be a mess. Let's figure out a second gear leave. Let's spool it a few times, whatever we got to do. This is our only way down, right? So I would say that probably was the biggest mistake I made. That's on me. I should have just said, all right, this is not going to happen. Let's figure out how to work this thing in second and go from there. I think if I'd have done that, it's quite possible we could have had a little better hold on things, So anyhow, those are the variables that were at play. At the end of the day, if a racetrack is, super slick or whatever, it's up to you to try to figure it out, try to figure out a way down it, And I always say, as a racer, like, I don't have to have a racetrack that's super pristine all the time. I'm not really that guy. But, we're successful no prep racers, so like we like it crappy too. But what I really the tracks that I do get kind of upset about are tracks that are inconsistent. Like they prep the snot out of it before this round, and then nothing next time, or whatever. Like it's hard as a racer or a tuner to work around a moving target, right? But now that wasn't really the case in this case. But anyhow, just talking prep in general. Now, as far as the race goes, another thing we had happening is, when the track's, slick, and you kind of have to work maybe with your traction control, or in our case, profiler, a lot to figure out a way down this thing. And the first few passes, I didn't even catch this at first, but the profiler was doing what it was supposed to do, but the end result wasn't happening. The motor wasn't actually pulling timing to get things under control. And after a pass or two, I finally realized what's happened, and we go check and get to the bottom of it. There was somehow, we don't exactly know what's happened, but maybe an old file got loaded at some point or something. But in the pin map, the profiler's correction output was pinned to the wrong input on the Holly, right? So anyhow, once we fixed that, we got down the racetrack. One time in the semis, I'd say we got down the racetrack. It did go somewhat down. I think it went like a 755, 196 or something. And that was really the only time that we got down the whole night. We won in the finals, but that was an ugly way to win. The other guy red lit a little bit. We tried to go a tick faster, which was probably a mistake. Another mistake. If I'd do that again, I would not try to go any faster. It's just, the racetrack's not there to do it, Take your chances on what you got. And that would have been the smarter tunerator decision in my case. So there are a couple mistakes that I made during this whole deal. But anyhow, in the semis, we got it to we could make a pass without lifting, put it that way. And we'll take a look at the data on that, and just to see what that looks like when the profiler is really having to work its tail off to get things done. We'll take a look at that. All right, let's look at this profiler data of the one pass where we did semi-successfully go from A to B with the throttle pedal mashed the whole time. All right, you can see here what we did the pass before is, I think if I remember right, the past before or two, we got this far. We managed to do this, right? But no farther. So anyhow, I kind of used, you got to remember, we're so far away from our usual tunes that we got nothing. We got no drive shaft data in this, anywhere near this. So we're just kind of having to come up with stuff as we get it. So anyhow, I take that drive shaft data and build a profile that is just super tight on it. Because my goal at this point is not to go any faster here. Just to keep going. At some point, big block stuff happens, right? And that's just the whole goal, right? And as you see, that in the semifinals, that actually worked. As soon as it slips right here, the profiler, the better you can get your profile, the closer you can get it to where you're actually going, the better it's going to work, right? Because it's going to grab it sooner and start making corrections when you slip, right? And I also tightened up our ranges way down tight on the profile, so it's almost immediately starts dropping holes. And that's what it does. As soon as we get here, we slip, bam, bam, bam. We're dropping all the holes. We're pulling all the time, and we're getting it back under control. Gets it back, comes loose again. Down here, you can see all our corrections. As we go above, right here, we're correcting down here. Same thing, all the way through here. It's just tearing the tire up. At this point, now we're kind of hooked up for a little bit, but we're way underneath our profile. So it's not as effective. Now, there's things I could do to make this better in the future as well. But like I say, we're out in la-la land here. It's so crazy. Here, we slip again. It grabs it, tugs it back down, starts to slip, never gets really above, just barely wiggles it right here. Down here, we're above it, grab it, and just keep on going until we get through this thing somehow. Anyhow, that's the semis. Let's look at the Holly version of that. Here you can see the motor is just, just clobbered. And this is for Garrett, this is kind of like the weirdest pass he's ever been in because he can't tell what's happening. And I told him, I says, if it's act stupid, as long as you can drive it and it's not just blowing the tires off, hold it down. And that's what he did. And so it feels like in the car, it's like weird because the motor's doing crazy stuff and, just weird. But anyhow, that's how ugly a 755, I think it was, looks like in a car like Mullet where your boost is, cut in half and you're just doing whatever you can do to try to get it down the racetrack. That's it. It's not pretty. But, like I say, we won the race. But it's nothing to brag about, for sure. But anyhow, that's it for today. HeraldEngine.com merch, snazzy t-shirts like this. And some of you guys that have been screaming about some of the sizes that you haven't been getting, we just got some of that in. Actually, a bunch of them just shipped, I think, yesterday. So you'll probably have it in a couple days. And you can get off my back about it. Quit hassling me. But anyhow, you'll have your stuff. And, there should be more to buy if you guys want it. But that's all for today.
Can you do it good?